So I've heard people say that it's like a black box, that even the developers don't know what exactly is going on. They just know that, okay, there's some codes and everything is working. So I'm like, can you explain? Because I was trying to wrap my head around it. Like,
Yeah, I would say, I mean, for me, so think about it this way.
hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Everything AI and Law podcast. On today's episode, I'm really excited because I have somebody I greatly admire in the AI sector. He's an expert, and not to be biased, he's also Nigerian, so he really inspires me that my dreams are valid. His name is Dr. Michael Akinwumi, and he's the Chief Responsible AI Officer at the National Fair Housing Alliance, where he is responsible for critical responsibilities such as the development and the implementation of responsible AI policies, to mention a few. So I will let him introduce himself, because to introduce him would take like days, because he's really good at what he does. And so thank you so much, sir, for coming. How are you doing, doctor?
Thank you so much, Tolu. I think it's okay if I call you Tolu. Is it Tolu or Tolulope? Okay, yeah. So
Tolu.
thank you so much, Tolu, for the warm introduction. And like you said, I'm Michael Akinwumi. In terms of like what I do, just introducing what I do currently with the National Fair Housing Alliance. I can go straight into like responsible AI and all that, but I just want to provide some context for the reader, for the listeners, so that they understand the evolution of the work that I currently lead at the National Fair Housing Alliance. So first, the National Fair Housing Alliance is a civil rights organization, and it's dedicated to eliminating all forms of discrimination, segregation in housing, and also ensuring that all Americans have equal and equitable access to well-resourced communities, right? Now, one may be asking that how did a civil rights organization get into AI business, right? So, but again, as an organization that really prioritizes, filing lawsuits against those companies that are discriminating, right? So, in housing and also lending, think about 5 or 10 years ago. That was when the organization realized that it's really important to be part of those who are seeking solutions when it comes to the use of AI in housing, if we really want to eliminate algorithmic discrimination, algorithmic bias in housing and lending. So as a result of that, about 4 years ago, they decided to start tech equity. In fact, when I joined my organization, I joined first as a consultant, and then later on went on to be the chief tech equity officer. And the way we're thinking about tech equity, again, is you're thinking of AI or machine learning models or even tech infrastructure as a whole. We wanted to make sure that the system or the use of AI in housing and lending is non-discriminatory. That was really the focus, the early on focus that we had. So we're looking into different techniques for ensuring or constraining algorithms to be fair. For example, in the US, we talk about disparate impact here when it comes to the anti-discrimination laws, right? So there are standards in terms of like that disparate impact or disparate treatment, and you want to make sure that the algorithms you are developing and also deploying are not, discriminating in the context of disparate impact and disparate theory. So we kept looking into different ways for removing disparate treatment from the data, or how to make sure that we develop models that are fair in the context of disparate impact and disparate treatment. or maybe even looking at the policies that implement the AI recommendations. So from tech equity, we expanded to responsible AI, which again, by responsible AI to us, we're thinking about 5 principles, right? So one, you want to make sure that the use of AI in housing and lending is non-discriminatory, which is the core pillar of the fair housing movement, the core pillar of the civil rights movement, non-discrimination. But to enforce that, or to ensure that algorithms are non-discriminatory, you also need other pillars or principles. The second principle is privacy preservation. You want to make sure that your AI system preserves individual privacy, right? You don't want to say, well, because you're developing AI systems, you just use some personally identifiable information that is going to lead to breach of privacy. So privacy preservation is the second principle, and there are a lot of techniques that we're looking into or that we've looked into to ensure that the systems are constrained to preserve privacy. The third area for us is what I call reliability. We want to make sure that the system is reliable, which means it is safe. And then in terms of its performance, it's also performing equally or equitably across all the different classes that we care about. And then the fourth principle is the principle of explainability. Like when a human makes a decision, the rational thing to ask for is explanation. How did you arrive at this decision? The same thing should apply to AI system. So you want to make sure that you are able to explain the outcome. You're able to explain the decision. You're able to explain the recommendations that is coming out of the AI system. And the last principle is the principle of governance. And sometimes you may hear me call it the controllability or contestability. You want to make sure that there is a process in place to rein in the system when possible. If we establish that a system is discriminatory, right? Or maybe why during development, during testing, you establish that this system has some form of disparity, racial disparity or gender disparity, right? So there should be a process in place to govern the system. So just to summarize briefly, by responsible AI, we're talking about fairness or non-discrimination, 1, and then 2, privacy preservation, 3, explainability, 4, reliability, that is safe and also valid across all groups, and 5, governance. You want to make sure there is human in the loop to ensure that you can control the system. So that's really a quick summary, and I hope a quick summary of the work that I do.
That's like a crash course on responsible AI 101. So I have a follow question on the explainability and governance. So I'll start with explainability. So I've heard people say that it's like a black box, that even the developers don't know what exactly is going on. They just know that, okay, there's some codes and everything is working. So I'm like, can you explain? Because I was trying to wrap my head around it. Like,
yeah, I would say, I mean, for me, so think about it this way. Say you walk into, a clinic, or, you have an appointment with your medical doctor, and your medical doctor just blindly close her eyes, and then, have a needle, and so she still closes her eyes, have a needle, brought
I'm
it
going to
up,
run away.
and then you're going to run away, right? And then say, oh, you know what? The needle is a black box. I just want to inject you. Let's see what it looks like. Because, I've gone to, I've had all this medical training for years, right? But then I can't still explain why I'm making the decision. Like, I'm glad you said, before I even finished that analogy, you said you're going to run away. So the same thing. Like, I mean, I understand the hype that comes with AI. I understand the mystique that people try to create around AI, that, oh, it's some mystery that is going on and all that, right? But the good thing is, My background is in math, and I got my PhD in math. And I can tell you that even at the heart of some of these generative AI, which is the latest on the AI train, right? The math behind them is something that one can understand. Like, I mean, the tech companies try to make the society believe that the AI systems, they just configure themselves, they create themselves and all that. That's not what is happening. So when you think about AI system, so there are different components, right? But I think it's about 4 or 5 components, so to say. One, you need data, okay?
Okay.
Then two, you need your problem statement. You need to be clear about what problem you're trying to solve, okay? And then three, you need code, okay? So you need, I don't know what language you want to use, be it in Python or R or Java. So you need code. So I said data, your problem statement, you need code, right? That's the third one. The fourth one, you need compute resources. You need to decide what hardware you want to use. You configure them together, right? And then the fifth one, you need a policy that is going to implement the decisions coming out of the AI system. Now, out of all those 5 that I mentioned, right, it is impossible to see where you don't need humans. So for the data, it is human that will decide what data to collect, for example. For the problem statement, it is human that decide, well, these are the problems we want to solve. This is how we want to solve it. For the code, it is human that writes the code. Even now, let's say generative AI, you can, get some code out of them, but you still need human to specify in terms of like prompts what they need. You need human to review it. And then the compute resources itself, right? Like, I mean, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google and other tech companies, they have data center, they have cloud environments, right? That they have people that are working around the clock to maintain them. So for the compute resources, you also need human. For the policies that implement them, you also need humans, right? So all that said, it's just completely untrue that this system is not something that humans can understand. But again, in terms of like specialization, we all have our specialization, right? So all these pillars that I mentioned, there are people who specialize in data. They know the data so well. In terms of the code, there are developers that all they do, like the researchers, and these are like AI research scientists that understand it so well. Like if you think about the world population, 8 billion, right? So maybe you only have a couple of thousands of people who can code so well. But the fact that those people are rare to find does not mean that we cannot understand what is going on under the hood. So, and there are different approaches out there, techniques that can be used or that are being used to explain, not only explaining the outcome of the system, but to also explain the structure of the system, right? So, so there's no mystery. It just depends on the level of expertise, the level, like the specialization and all that. And also being able to also ask the right questions, right? So that people can dig and find answers based on where or areas they specialize.
So now, where does now I'm trying to connect. So you need a background in maths to be able to develop an AI model. So I know that you need data, you need code, you need the data, you need the problem statement, you need the code, you need the policy. So
Yeah.
is it in the code that the maths is required? I want to
Yeah.
that
So
part.
I intentionally just use the word code
Okay.
because again, I'm glad you said, we're both Nigerians, right? But I remember those days in Nigeria, the moment you mentioned you're studying math, cognitive biases were coming, right? And even people who are studying math, then, the way they would dress, they would be frowning as if they have the weight of the world on top of their head and all those things, right? So, and growing up, being conscious or aware of, some of these societal biases or cognitive or prejudices against those with quant background or math or, statistics, physics, computing science, and that was why I just used the word code, right? But now, to your point, I said you have data, right? Of course, to put the data together and all those things, right? If you want to represent anything on a computer, right, or on a machine, you need, they are all coded. Like all these, even the conversations we're having now, for the system to be able to like process it, it's really in form of some code, right? But just looking at the data, just in the context of AI system, so on one side, you have the data, right? On the other side, the business is going to say, well, these are the problems that I want to solve. For example, it could be the problem of I want to identify those who are less likely to be delinquent on my loan applications, right? Or I want to understand those profiles that I should target for marketing for my new product. Or say I want to know, I want to understand those that I should recommend some products for. So those are what I mean by problem statement. So you have the data, you have the problem statement. Now, to connect the data to the problem, that is in between, you have the math. But the computer does not understand math. What the computer understands is the code or the language. So the code is a representation of the logic that is represented as math, right? So in between is where you need the code so that you can make that connection to the problem statement. You can evaluate how it is solving the problem and all that, right? And that said, like I mentioned, there are at least 5 areas that are connected to the AI system. It does not really mean that everybody has to be a coder or a developer, right? Because AI system is a socio-technical system. It is a system that it does not operate in vacuum, right? So it is connected to the society. So it has social impact. So people just need to figure out like what areas are they already specialists, right? In terms of their career path. And then see, because AI, this technology, it's disrupting everything. It's impacting everything. So it doesn't mean that for one to have conversations around AI, then you need to be a coder. Because again, what coders, developers are really doing is just building, it's just a small area of all this conversation, trying to build a model in form of coding, right? That connects data to the problem that one is trying to solve.
Wow. Now I get it. Honestly, wow. Thank
Yeah,
you.
okay.
Thank you. That is so insightful. So, you have a PhD in applied mathematics. How did you link it to AI or tech?
Yeah, great question. So, one of the things I remember even when I was in high school, so I've always really developed interest in math. Like, I mean, there were instances where I would even not attend some classes, but then I would still be able to just solve the problems, right? Myself and all that. But so then one of the questions I always ask is, what is not mathematics, right? I mean, I always ask myself, is there something in this world or universe that is not math? Because I think math is everything. And depending on who you talk to, they have different definitions for math and all that, right? But I think about it as a profession that tries to identify patterns in a system, right? So wherever you're trying to recognize patterns, you're trying to identify patterns, that's math. It could manifest itself in terms of like other applied areas like statistics, like physics. In fact, some aspect of chemistry, like physical chemistry is also to me applied math, right? So I've always been thinking about patterns in the systems that I'm really interested in. And when I think about system, for example, it would just be like insurance, or it could just be like a biological system, right? Or it could just be like maybe even some organelle, right, within your biological system, or maybe just a cellular system, right? or it could just be housing system, or the whole economy itself, like economic system, or I mean, different areas that you can think about. So I've been thinking about it that way, right? Now, when it comes to AI, just like I mentioned, it's the more you think about an AI system, you will get to that point, that middle layer between data and the problem statement, where you start peeling the onions, and then you realize that at the core of it, or the heart of it, is the model, right? So like AI system, be it even like robotics, or like the transformers that are behind, let's say Chat GPT, when you go under the wood, you will see that it is really a set of mathematical equations, right? Now, you remember I said I've been thinking about patterns, trying to find patterns everywhere, right? And now I'm talking about AI itself. When you peel the onions, you're going to see that it is really all about a set of equations. Now, the question is, what are equations? Equations, anyway, to me, they are just representations of thoughts. Like there are some, thoughts that you may have, and you're thinking, how do you write them down? You may want to write them down as like, the normal, usual English text, right? But for those of us that have mathematical training, we have symbolic representations of all these thoughts. So that was how I made that connection between, okay, applying math to a system that I'm really interested in. And now we're talking about AI system, right? You see math there. And now the AI system could also be applied to insurance, to housing, to lending, and to other areas which are also systems, right? And then as you're doing that, you're trying to identify patterns, because all these data representations that I'm talking about, data is just a representation of patterns, right? So that's how I was able to make that connection.
Okay, so um, you promised to come back, so I would ask the last question because I know you have
Yeah,
to go. So
yeah.
um, I know that there are Nigerians that will watch this or watching this, and what word of encouragement would you have for them?
Oh, for the Nigerians that are watching this, right?
Yes.
I mean, in fact, when you ask that question, it's yeah. I don't want to be emotional on the on your podcast,
It
but
was
I mean,
emotional asking it for me too. I just
yeah, because I'm Nigerian. I know what is really going on back home, right? So in terms of like, as an average Nigerian, we work really hard to, to have access to some of these opportunities, right? And I could imagine, I mean, for Nigerians, wherever they are, but again, my heart really goes to those who are really back home, right? So, the key thing for me in terms of like, I mean, if they decide that they want to get into AI and all those things, right? I think the opportunities are there. And many of the universities that we have back home in Nigeria as well, some of them I've been talking to them about, we need to start preparing people for the future of work. And for example, when you think about some of these generative AI platforms, right? You think about Chat GPT and all that. I don't know what a lecturer in Nigeria can do now that Chat GPT will not do, right? Even Gemini, I don't know what you can
God.
get from Gemini and exactly, right? So, there are some universities that I reached out to in the past in terms of like, how can you even develop a course, even if just like a certificate program, like data science certificate program, so that people are really aware of some of these things, right? And the first code, I didn't write any code until I got to, I think maybe second year in my university. Whereas, I mean, coding is something that you can even start as early as age 7 or age 8. Like my first son now, when he's 7, I'm hoping that he's going to develop interest. I'm not going to force it, but I'm hoping that he's going to show interest in learning about some of this. So my advice, and I know for Nigerians it could be really tough, but my advice for them is really to make sure that they are persistent after they identify what they want to really specialize in. But even that said, technology, it's a disruptive force that is going to, touch everything. And if you're thinking about, what impact we can create, right? You need to think about what areas you want to focus on in all the different components of AI systems that I mentioned. So even if it's just about, I think in Nigeria there is it IITA, if I remember those days, if they are still there, right? But I know that they can, even outside school hours, if the universities, for example, are not equipping them with the skills that will get them ready for the future of work, AI is something that they need to also really focus on and start, proactively trying to gain the skills, develop the skills that is required for them to make sure that when, let's say like 5, 10 years from now, when everybody realizes that, well, without AI, you probably can't do anything, right? They are actually ready for that. It's more like being in the time of typewriter, right? And now we know that we're using computer for everything. But if you're still stuck in the age of typewriter, then you'll not be able to operate or function or even get employed right now. So that's what I was saying. And the last thing is Nigerian education is very, very important. It's actually foundational, right? Like, for me, my breakthrough, and I don't want to say like in Nigeria, talk about Japa or I don't know what that means in English, right? But really, my breakthrough into all this area is because I took the Nigerian education, right, very serious, right? So wherever people are now, whatever they're doing right now, I mean, they just need to be committed to it, be diligent, and extract the values from that because they will be surprised where that education, the Nigerian education, can actually take them if they're diligent enough and ready to, commit themselves to working out. And the last thing I'll say about that is there's a favorite quote that I got from one of my high school teachers at then about hard work. I think he said something like, hard work does not kill, but it hardens you and prepares you for a greater tomorrow. So that's it.
Hard work does not kill, but it hardens you and prepares you for a better tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yes, you got it well.
Thank
It's
you.
not my quote. I got it from one of my former teachers. Okay.
Thank you so much. I
You're
have
welcome.
learned a lot, and definitely I'm going to have you back on this podcast because we haven't even scratched the surface of what
Exactly.
we wanted to discuss. But thank
It's
you
my
so much,
pleasure.
sir. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
And thank
And
you so much for reaching out. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I promise to be back at the appropriate
yeah,
time. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you. And to our listeners, I'm definitely sure you learned a lot. And stay tuned because we're going to have him back. Thank you so much, everyone. Until next episode, take care and bye bye.